Happy New Year, and welcome to my list of my top 10 favorite authors. This video, just like my video on my top 10 books, is a companion to my video on how I picked up reading as a hobby. One of the things that really helped me get into reading was getting lots of recommendations by people with good taste. Whether you're looking to develop a habit or just looking for your next great read, I hope someone on this list resonates with you. Probably not everything will, because this is my top 10, not the top 10, and while I think I have good taste, I guess I have unique taste. If you've seen that other top 10 video, let me assure you that there's no overlap between that one and this one. Whereas that video lists my top 10 reads, I made sure not to include any titles by an author where I love everything that they've written, or at least authors where I've enjoyed everything that I've read, and I made sure to pick authors where I've read at least 3 of their books. Some of these authors are ones that I've read since I was a teenager, and others are ones that I picked up just last year. But every single name on this list is one I would reread or trust that any new book of theirs to be as good as gold. Without further ado, let's name names. At number 10, we have Michel Foucault. So you've been to grad school without saying you've been to grad school. I think I was the only one in class who really enjoyed Discipline and Punish. I really appreciated both how it was structured and argued, and what it said about institutions and power in modern society. Once you start reading Foucault, you see his influence in a great deal of modern history, sociology, and philosophy. Since graduation, I've gone on to read a few more of his books, and his most lasting impact on me is that now I'm a much more careful thinker. In 9th place, Banana Yoshimoto. I was first introduced to Banana Yoshimoto as a sophomore in high school, and I read her to this day. When you first open one of her books, you might think you're in for a gentle slice of life story, but her tone is deceptive. Yoshimoto writes stories about dark, sad themes, like being raised with your chronically ill, chronically in pain, embittered, abusive cousin. Despite these raw themes, her heroines find hope in the little everyday things around them and never lose the ability to keep working towards the life they want to live. Mackenzie Lee takes 8th place. During the pandemic, a dear friend of mine, Pixiemusing, I'm putting her socials in the description, recommended that I read A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. It's a little raunchier than I usually like, but Lee's writing is magnetic. The characters feel like they belong in the world they live in, and she knows exactly how to ratchet up the stakes. Lee also holds a special designation on this list for writing really solid representation. One of her characters is asexual, and for years I felt affinity for her. Another of her characters has epilepsy, so when I experienced an unexplained seizure, I was drawn into her stories yet again. Number 7 is Sarah Waters. I first heard of Waters in the summer before college, but it took me years to work up the courage to read one of her famously gay books. In 2016, I reached a breaking point. I had few queer friends and I felt quite alone, so I bought them all at once and I read them at frenzy. They were exactly what I needed, but they were more than just topical. Waters writes so smoothly that I would often look up to find that I was 50 pages further along than I had been the last time I thought to check. In 6th place, I have Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman writes weird, dark fantasy books that sometimes lean into horror. When my stepmom recommended that I read American Gods, my reaction to Bilquis was something along the lines of, how and why was that published in a book that I had to read with my mortal human eyeballs? She told me to keep reading, and I did. Gaiman's books work because no matter how grotesque they get, they're the perfect balance between books that you read in order to enjoy the experience of reading them and books that actually go somewhere and resolve in a really satisfying way. Number 5 is Hannah Arendt. That's right, I've got not one but 2 philosophers on this list. On Revolution was my introduction to her work, but it was On Violence that hooked me. This is where I learned a cornerstone of my own political views. When there's conflict between a black person and a racist, each one will have their own idea about how this conflict can be solved. To resolve things to the black person's satisfaction, the racist needs to change his mind. To resolve things to the racist person's satisfaction, the black person has to stop existing. This is true for any and all minority groups. These last 4 really could have gone in any order. They all strike that perfect balance between moment-to-moment readability and overall plot, and they all write characters that seem like they exist in the world and grow and change in response to the things happening around them, which is a thing that a surprising number of authors seem to struggle with. Number 4 is Lois McMaster Bujold. I started reading The Sharing Knife when I was 15 and finished it during the pandemic. It turns the classic love story narrative on its head. Dag and Fawn are married by the end of the first book, and they spend the subsequent 3 navigating in-laws and starting a business. Next, I read the Chalion series, the second book of which would have made the other list if Bujold hadn't been such a consistently good writer. I have never before or since read a character arc so strong. I'm looking forward to reading her Vorkosigan series, which I hear is her best work. Casey McQuiston takes 3rd place. I thought One Last Stop was the best love story ever written, and then I read Red, White, and Royal Blue. McQuiston had already earned their place on this list when they wrote I Kissed Chara Wheeler, which includes the greatest feat of evocation I've ever read. I was just thinking that the book felt a bit like a John Green novel, when the main character commented on how her life felt like a John Green novel. When the plot thickened, I started thinking in terms of Gillian Flynn. And so did she. McQuiston is an incredibly talented writer, and I can't wait to see what they do next. Robin Hobb is in 2nd place. About a year ago, my stepsister recommended that I read the Fireseer trilogy, which is about 2,400 pages. Hobb gets full points in every category, but her 2 standouts are writing villains and writing endings where the characters don't get what they want, but they do get what they need. If they can get redeemed, they get redeemed. If they can't, Hobb doesn't bother making excuses for cruel, thoughtless people who ruin other people's lives, which makes for a very satisfying narrative. And number 1, the very best author I've read in years, Madeline Miller. As of my including her in this list, Miller had only written 2 books. Since I made this list, on November 8th of this year, Miller dropped a 3rd book, which I promptly ordered from the library. Don't buy books. She turns the classics inside out and tells them from the point of view of a minor character, the Iliad by Patroclus and the Odyssey by Circe, and infuses them with a modern style that captures the heights of ancient storytelling while appealing to a contemporary audience's sensibility. These books hold up on a reread, and Galatea is my most anticipated book of the new year. And there we have my top authors. Make sure to let me know in the comments who your favorite authors are and what you look for in a creator. Oh, and if you're looking forward to someone's new release, make sure to tell us all about it. Personally, I'm looking forward to Tamara Pierce's The Exile's Gift, which keeps getting postponed. Last but not least, if you haven't checked out the top 10 books list, make sure to give that one a watch for more recommendations. Oh, and keep an eye out for my upcoming video, The Case for Audiobooks. Alright guys, Happy New Year!